Hi everyone, I think we might be live. How are you doing today? um, I am Karen. I am the Plant Power Coach, if you don't know me. Good to see you here today. Now, if you haven't seen me before, I am a plant-based health coach and I help people achieve their health and their weight goals using the power of plant-based eating, basically. So I also help them with things like their mindset and their relationship to food. And I'm here most weeks to help give you my best tips, tricks, and mindset shifts to help you make plant-powered living really easy too. And today I'm probably just a little bit more nervous because I thought today I might pause just a bit and just talk about my journey and what brought me to doing what I'm doing today. And it's a bit of a long story, so strap yourself in for the ride. But there are really two parts of my story, and there's the food and the health side of my story, and then there's the whole self-love, relationship to self, self-image, self body image part of my life. And that's how I viewed myself, how I viewed my body, and how it sort of affected my confidence over my life. So those two parts of my story have definitely brought me to why I'm here today, and definitely have had an impact on how I've built my program as well. So I'll try and weave these stories together best I can. Stick with me. But let's start back at the beginning. So my mother was a 70s hippie, I used to like to say, and she raised us on a diet of whole grains, whole foods, whole meal, everything homemade. It was wonderful, from wholemeal cookies to homemade wholemeal bread, oatmeal, and muesli, homemade muesli. Dad still makes the muesli to this day, and we mostly had homegrown veggies as well, which was great. And most of the places we lived in growing up, we actually had a veggie garden. Dad still tends his veggie garden to this day as well. So some really great, I guess, health things ingrained in us from a young age. And my brother and I were really lucky. We got that really good start in life, and we were pretty physically healthy. We were physically very active as well. We both played sports as kids. My brother's an avid skateboarder, still is to this day at age 43. I was a national junior badminton champ with my doubles partner, Kirsten. Shout out to you, Kirsten, if you happen to be watching this at all. And I was, always in the top netball team at school as well. So yeah, we were always out in the yard playing. I think our bodies were fueled right from the start. We were very active. We were riding our bikes everywhere. We weren't brought up in front of the telly, I guess. This is the day before mobile screens as well. So, and I always remember Mum talking about the importance of fibre. If you haven't heard me talking about fibre, then go back and listen to some of my other videos or see some of my other posts. But I talk about fibre all the time. And but back then, we really didn't know about the importance so much of fibre. We just knew that it was, important to keep us regular. We know so much more about the impacts of fibre on our gut health and our overall health these days as well. We weren't raised vegetarian. We certainly weren't raised vegan. We ate a pretty standard Western diet for the time. So meat, dairy, eggs, but these were mainly whole foods. There was not a lot of processed. There was a little bit of takeaway, but it was the treat. It wasn't the norm. And two of my very first memories as a child are probably the two memories that sort of kicked off these two parts of my story. I was probably around the ages of 3 or 4. But these two first memories are around my food and my food preferences as I grew up, and what led me to kind of be where I am today. And the other one was around my relationship to my body and my self-image. So I'll start with the food preferences story. And as I said, I was probably around age 3 or 4. I remember sitting on the grass outside of our house one day trying to eat a piece of steak. And I was chewing and I was chewing and I was chewing, and it tasted disgusting to me, and I didn't like the texture, and I just couldn't bring myself to swallow it. And I spat it out and I refused to eat the rest. And from then onwards, I was always a really fussy eater when it came to eating meat. I didn't really like many of the meats that were put on my plate. I would pick them apart, push them to the side of my plate. My dad used to laugh at me and he used to eat it for me. I definitely preferred eating my veggies. I loved fruit. And very early on in my life, I started connecting the food I was eating, or the meat products, to the animals that I was also starting to make a connection with. I had cats from a young age, and I also loved just talking to random animals, be they dogs or cows or sheep or horses, anything. I love to just connect to them. I love to see the way they responded to me. I love the way that they would look at me with their big brown eyes, and to me, the thought of eating their bodies wasn't tasty at all. But I did for a long time, obviously, as a child, until around my teenage years, when I realized that we didn't actually have to eat their bodies. I started learning about vegetarianism, and I started also making some of the family meals at home, and started experimenting with vegetarian cooking, much to my father's dismay. And at age 20, when I left home, I went to live with my then fiance, and we gave up eating meat at that point as well. So I'm just going to leave that story there for the moment, and I'll come back to that one. I'll flip now to the other very early childhood story, which was around that kicks off sort of my relationship to my body and myself. And again, I was around that age 3 or 4. And I remember, as I was sort of writing the notes for this, I was getting a little bit emotional because I was sort of recalling, I guess, the emotions of this. I was feeling for this little child. I've obviously healed the wounds that this brought up for me over my life now, which is why I can speak about it. But, I was sort of getting a little bit emotional for the child that was, and remembering who she was, and how this made her feel. But it was about age of 3 or 4, I went to a gymnastics class of some sort for young children. And our neighbours were very heavily involved in the gymnastics scene, which is why I went along with them. And it was looking around that room for the first time and seeing all these other kids in their gymnastics gear. And I realised, or maybe I just told myself at that point, that, I had chunky legs. I had stocky legs. I was this little kid, and I'd look around the room and think, gee, even the fat kids have skinny legs. And I didn't see myself as fat necessarily. I didn't have a large belly or anything like that, but there were kids there that did have large bellies and skinny legs, and it just made me feel really sort of bad about my body type. I didn't know anything about different body types. I didn't know that, genetics can play a part in our physical shape. I was just a tiny kid who saw herself as having something she didn't wanted, which was stocky legs or fat legs. I didn't like them, and I wanted skinny legs. I wanted to be different to something than I actually was. And that view of myself is something that I struggled with most of my life. And the crazy thing is, looking back at some of the photos of myself when I was a kid, at times when I'd have these growth spurts, I was actually quite lanky, but I never saw myself that way at the time. I in the photos, I look at myself and say, gee, I was a skinny little kid then, but I didn't see it. I thought that I was chunky. And this is the power of the mind to distort how we see our bodies, and then the disdain that we can develop towards ourselves that makes us want to hide ourselves. It makes us feel self-conscious about ourselves and our bodies, and stops us really from achieving success in our lives, because for some reason we think we're not enough. When we talk about in self-development, when we talk about, some of the wounds that people hold on to, it's often because of a relationship with a parent in their early stages of life. And I remember this relationship to myself and my body was nothing to do with my parents. It was to do with how I viewed myself against my peers. And I'll get to something else later that also affected my self-confidence. And added to that, I was a redhead growing up. Um, so this is in an age where diversity was not really a thing. We didn't have a lot of, immigration to the country, and certainly not in the places where I was growing up. Kids are pretty mean when they're young, and they pick on whoever doesn't fit in. And right then, just because I had red hair, I was the one who stood out to everybody. And I was also told by kids that I was ugly, and while this doesn't really have much to do with my health journey, it has a lot to do with my self-image journey, because I wasn't loving what I saw in the mirror. I saw this ugly little redhead kid who had chunky legs, and it affected my self-confidence and my self-worth and my self-love, and it made me want to be something different. And I wanted to really change who I was. I didn't want to stand out in a way that I thought was going to get me this negative attention. And that really affected me for quite a few years. It took me a long time to sort of get through. And people look at me today and they have no idea that that part of me ever existed, because I've found a way to heal those wounds. They don't see that ugly little kid anymore, because that's not how I see myself. They never knew who I did, but I don't see myself that way anymore. And a wise person once told me on my journey, I think I would have been in my 30s at this time, that people will see you how you see yourself. So how do you want others to see you? And it really affected me. It really made me go, wow, how do I want people to see me? Now, of course, I didn't want to be that little kid, did I? So I did a lot of work over the years to make sure that I wasn't going to grow up to be that person. I didn't want to hold that image of myself, because it didn't feel nice to be that kid, and I didn't want to feel that way about myself. And, I don't mean I did anything drastic like, cosmetic surgery or anything like that. No, I just mean that I worked hard to maintain a reasonably healthy weight all my life, because I know that to slide off track would make me, I guess, blow up and be more chunky than I wanted to be. And I also worked hard on finding a look that I knew would suit me in a natural way. I didn't want to have to spend hours doing hair and makeup and things like that and look totally false. But I know for a fact that short hair does not suit me. So you're never going to see me with short hair. I look terrible. I'm not going back there ever again. So, a lot of trial and error to help heal those wounds of feeling like that ugly little kid inside that nobody really liked and nobody wanted to play with. So that's the heavy stuff. That's the heavy stuff over. But coming back now to my food and my health journey. So we left off when I was age 20 and went vegetarian with my ex. So sometime a few years later, my ex and I started getting involved with animal rights organizations, and we learned a lot about what goes on in the dairy and the egg industries. And we decided we didn't want to be part of that as well, so we went vegan at the time. And I can tell you at that moment, oh my God, I dropped about, I don't know, I think about 10 kilos. I don't know how much it was actually, but I dropped weight so quickly. And that was literally just from removing the remaining animal products from my diet. I loved it. I felt like I had so much more energy and I felt great all the time in my body. But, there were some negatives that started to creep in at the time. It started to learn how to make, not so healthy foods in a vegan way. And also we were too focused on where we were going to get our protein from. This is why I say to people, don't focus on this, it's just not right. And we were eating horrible tasting soy isolate protein powder shakes and eating these really terrible tasting meat replacement products. They weren't very good back then. And but as a result of trying to increase my protein, because I thought that was what was going to help me with my weight loss, I started putting on weight. And then I tried doing things like Bill Phillips' 12-week challenge. I don't know if any of you remember Bill Phillips, but he used to have this 12-week challenge that was an international thing, and people used to follow this particular regime, and they'd start with an average-looking body and come out with their dream body, and they could win massive prizes. Well, I used to try and do this all the time, and I would start off with a hiss and a roar. I'd have my plan in place. I would know what I was doing and have all my food worked out, and then 4 weeks later, I would drop off. I just find it too difficult to stick to. It was too regimented. I was too busy trying to manually count my macronutrients to make sure I got enough protein. And these are the days before things like, chronometers or MyFitnessPal or anything like that. So I was literally doing it manually, probably doing it all wrong too. And, I would beat myself up for falling off the wagon, and I would put on the weight all again. And back would come those feelings of self-loathing and hurt my self-worth. And because it was all tied to needing to achieve this particular look that was taking me away from my childhood. Now, with regards to things like animal activism, we got a little bit burnt out with that side of things, and we ended up going back to eating dairy. And then we moved to Australia, and at that point, I went back to eating fish. And we actually split up a couple of years after moving to Australia. But it was at that point, I think, that I really started to find a way to stand on my own, find my own voice. That whole marriage breakdown was a real pivotal shift for me in finding my confidence, who I was. I was learning who I was as an adult. I'd known him since I was 16. And I was starting to gain this confidence that I'd never had before in my life. Suddenly, I didn't have to try to please somebody else. I didn't have to be someone for something else. I was allowed to please myself. I was allowed to be who I wanted to be, and I found that really quite powerful. I think it was around about this stage that whoever said to me, how people will see you how you want. How you see yourself. So how do you want people to see you? And I think that's when it really flipped for me. I was just suddenly able to be a different person than the person I'd been in the past. And so I was now able to start being someone I wanted to be, and I started to love this person that I was creating and the life I was creating for myself. So that's when I started to really heal that whole wounded child self-love part of myself. And that's when I really started to get into things like self-development. And I actually wanted to be a life coach at some point in my life too. But flipping back to food and health, so I'd created this great new life of my own and found a new sense of self-worth and self-love, and had at the time had a successful career as a lingerie buyer. I was fit. I was working out like a maniac at the gym. I was in shape. I was loving it. And I was eating what I'd say fairly healthy. I was pescatarian, but I loved being in the kitchen. I worked with a lot of fresh ingredients, but as I say, I was still eating fish. I was still eating dairy. I was still eating eggs. I was still cooking with oil. And I also felt like if I didn't do these big monstrous workouts, then I would start to put on weight again, and up would come these little feelings of self-worth again, right? And they weren't fully healed. They were smaller. But my body was also starting to give me signs that it wasn't happy with me as well. I did end up becoming vegetarian. I wanted to give up the fish, that's fine, but my body was also starting to give me signs that it really wasn't happy with me. I started to become first really sensitive to apples. They'd make me really bloated, and I'd get nasty cramps. And then it was almonds, they'd do the same thing. And then beans and lentils and foods like that, until over time it was almost every meal that I ate, I started to feel this way. It wasn't any food in particular. I just felt awful after I'd eaten generally, and I felt like I had this distended belly, and I didn't even think to look into it really. Something intuitively told me that I didn't want doctors poking around or, putting me on medication or anything like that. I wanted to sort out what was going on with my body myself. I'd also started to break out into this dermatitis around my face regularly, and I'd get unexplained rashes all over my body. I had a little bit of eczema as a child, so I was really sensitive to that anyway. And then I used to get these terrible, terrible breakouts on my face as well, and I was really self-conscious about that. And I kept experiencing all of these symptoms, and I knew there was something related to food, but I didn't know what it was. But I also didn't realize that it was my body's way of just telling me overall I was sick. There was something inside of me that just wasn't well, and my body was trying to tell me. That was until I went for one of my regular yearly skin checkups. And a mole that had been on my leg hadn't been looking great. and I think I terrified the poor nurse who had a look at it. She referred me to a doctor, a GP who specialises in skin problems, who then referred me to a surgeon who suggested that we cut it out and have a look at it. Well, that's when it turned out it was an invasive melanoma, stage 1. Thankfully, we did catch it early. Stage 1 is not life-threatening per se, which is good, but we did need to operate a second time and take a wider margin of skin just to be really sure. So 2 operations later, big scar down my left thigh. Woohoo, I love my scars. And I had known, I'd known there was a link between diet and breast cancer from something I'd been involved in the past, and I'd always told myself that if I was to be diagnosed with breast cancer, I'd immediately go back to being vegan. So breast cancer does run in my family. My grandmother and great grandmother both had it. But this particular diagnosis of skin cancer was enough to kick me back to being vegan. I had wanted to go back to being vegan, but something was holding me back, and this was just that kick in the butt that said, just do it. So this started, I guess, my fascination with diet and disease. And I started doing a lot of research, watched a lot of documentaries, and eventually found the plant-based nutrition certification course through eCornell that I decided to study. It was then that I realized I was still making my body sick with the processed vegan foods and oils, so processed processed plant meats, processed cheeses. So I decided, rather than I realized my diet was not mainly whole food. It was probably 40 to 50% whole food, and the rest of it needed to go. So I decided to go low-fat, whole food, plant-based, alongside what I learned at eCornell. And I do this probably now 80 to 90% of the time, so rather than the 40 to 50% of the time. And just like that, like all of my symptoms that I'd been experiencing disappeared. I was suddenly able to, I was able to maintain my weight with ease without having to do all this excessive exercise that, I found that previously I was having to exercise like a maniac just to keep in shape. And I found now, eating this way, I didn't have to do that. Now I exercise because I love how it makes me feel. I don't have to do it to try and, maintain a body weight, which is great. I also, all my symptoms also disappeared. Things like the gut bloating, my gut suddenly was very healed, and my skin cleared up. I no longer had brain fog. I was able to think clearly. I didn't get that 3 p.m. slump every day as well. It was just amazing. And so that's why I decided that I wanted to actually help others achieve what I had achieved physically in my body. And that's where the whole health coaching thing started for me. So, I feel so much more alive now, and I really want to help other people achieve that. And I've also, achieved a lot of those inner childhood wounds, the wounds that made me feel like I wasn't good enough somehow, or not pretty enough, or not lovable enough. And, on top of that, I feel like my new way of eating allows me to live in a healthy body where my weight's maintained, and I'm able to live with a healthy mind as well. And we know that there is a significant relationship between gut health and mental health as well. And that, my friends, is why I am so passionate about wanting to help others in their health and their weight loss journey through the power of plant-based eating. I wanted to be able to find a way to help people heal not only not only heal their bodies from symptoms or illnesses, but actually help them heal their relationship to their food, to themselves and to their bodies as well. So as I said, we know that a poor diet can lead to poor relationship to self and to food, and vice versa. A poor relationship can lead to a poor relationship. Let's start that one again. A poor relationship to self can affect your relationship to food. You can reach for food to self-soothe. And we also know that a poor relationship to food can worsen the effect or worsen that relationship to self. So what I know is when I see people starting to eat this way, they not only start to see health improvements and start to lose weight easier than ever before, we also start to see that it affects things like their mental fog. The fog clears, their anxiety and the depression can certainly ease up. I know that, for some people it's a little bit more of a journey, but it certainly helps relieve a lot of that anxiety and depression. We know of the connection between gut health and mental health, and they can really start the process to being able to find peace and love with themselves and with their bodies for once. And I also wanted to be able to find a way to incorporate all of this in my 12-week Plant Power Transformation program. So I decided I was going to break the program into three main pillars. Now, you would have heard of body, mind, and soul. Mind, body, soul. I'm splitting mine up into body, mind, soul. So we under the body pillar, we talk to body first. We they they learn about healthy ways to fuel the body and learn tips and tricks to enhance things like weight loss in a healthy way, and also learn about the connection between diet and various diseases. And then under mind, we delve into identity and what might be holding them back from creating a new identity for a new future. We look at beliefs as well. What do they believe? What beliefs are they holding on to, and what beliefs do they maybe need to drop? We look at things like self-sabotaging behaviors and how to break free of their hold, and also look at patterns of things like stress and anxiety that not only cripple the mind, they cripple the body as well. And then under the soul, we learn how to integrate this new healthy way of fueling your body and your mind into the rest of your life. Take it out into your social life, bring your loved ones on the journey as well. And we look at also what other areas of life might need nourishing, so that they're not tempted to turn back to poor eating habits in order to soothe the soul, essentially. And then we take that new normal, as we call it, and we use that as a springboard to set new goals, new highs for the future, because we want to make sure that you're always looking forwards and not looking backwards and falling back into old patterns of behavior once the program is over. So I hope you enjoyed that little journey. I hope you understand a little bit more about me now and my history and what drove me to be so passionate about what it is that I'm doing today. If it resonates with you, please drop me a note and just say hi. Love to have a chat. If you're struggling on your own journey and think that my Plant Power Transformation program might be beneficial to help you, I'll drop a link in the comments for more information on that, or just reach out to me and we can have a chat, no problems. I am starting to take applications for next year's round of the program, which will kick off probably early February at this point. Spaces are limited, so don't think about it for too long. You don't want to have to wait another 4 months for it to launch again. So that's it for today, folks. Hope you enjoyed that little story. Hope you got something out of it. And I look forward to connecting with you and maybe having a chat with you a little bit later. And I'll see you all next week. Bye.